he was going for it, and my bodyguard reacted, like he was supposed to do.
Rapper Lil Boosie hired a hitman to kill another man after hearing his life was in danger. Opening statements began yesterday in the first-degree murder trial of Lil Boosie, whose real name is Torrance Hatch.
Cassidy is being held behind bars. He spent the weekend in jail after turning himself in to Philly police on Friday afternoon on those murder charges.
These days, just about every rapper boasts in their lyrics, talking about gang ties, moving weight, and even catching bodies. But while a lot of that is just for show, there are a few artists who actually lived what they rap about, including taking a life.
He needed to be in the ground. Put his ass where he supposed to be. He tried me.
And not only did they do it, they got away with it. Let's take a look. First up, we've got Gucci Mane, one of the true pioneers of trap music. Over the years, Gucci's built a massive catalog, dropping countless mixtapes and several albums that helped shape the sound of the streets. But before he became the iced-out rap icon we know today, he was just Radrick Davis, a kid growing up in Atlanta who had a knack for getting into trouble early on. Even as his music career started to gain momentum, Gucci couldn't seem to stay away from drama. Back in 2005, he found himself in the middle of a heated feud with another rising Atlanta star at the time, Young Jeezy. The beef between them was real, and it played out both in the streets and through diss tracks, with fans eating up every bit of the tension. Things got especially serious when Jeezy dropped a track called Stay Strapped. In the song, he took things to another level. Jeezy included a line that sounded more like a call to action than a bar. "I got a bounty on that ish, dude. 10 stacks. So if he come to your town and you just happen to snatch that mother F off his neck, I'ma shoot you the 10 stack, man, so I can cremate that mother F." The line was a direct reference to Gucci's signature chain, the one with the infamous ice cream cone. Whether Jeezy meant it as a literal bounty or just rap theatrics was up for debate. But some folks out there took it seriously. They saw 10 grand as enough motivation to actually go after Gucci, and that's when things started heading down a very dark path. On May 10th, 2005, just days after all this back and forth, Gucci was at a woman's house in Decatur, chilling, not knowing what was about to go down. According to reports, that night, 5 men burst into the house and ambushed him.
He visited a young lady, went over to her place. She was there, he was there. At one point, she opened up a door. 5 guys come running in.
They didn't just try to rob him. They allegedly started beating him down and even threatened to kill him. But Gucci wasn't the type to fold under pressure. Living up to the street persona he rapped about, he fought back. In the middle of the chaos, he managed to grab a gun and start firing. Shots rang out. In the scuffle, one of the attackers was hit and the rest ran off. The woman at the house reportedly fled too, terrified.
Had him wrapped up. Another guy had a weapon, hit one of the other guys with a weapon. It became a situation where he defended himself.
The man who got shot turned out to be Henry Pookie Lock Lee Clark III, a rapper affiliated with Jeezy's crew and someone Jeezy reportedly grew up with. Days later, Pookie Lock's body was found behind Columbia Middle School in Decatur. The aftermath hit hard. Word spread like wildfire, and the situation instantly went from rap beef to real-life tragedy. Gucci Mane became the center of a murder investigation. Not long after, a warrant was issued for his arrest, and Gucci turned himself in. He was officially charged with murder. While sitting in jail, Gucci called in for a phone interview to tell his side. "I just want everybody to know I'm not a murderer," he said. "I was upset, scared a little bit, but I had to do what I had to do. You gotta be a man about it. I'm not a bad person. I have remorse for everything that happened." Meanwhile, Jeezy tried to distance himself from the whole ordeal. Even though Pookie Lock was part of his camp and someone he had history with, Jeezy denied having any involvement in the attempted attack. He brushed it off like Gucci was using the incident for clout, trying to sell records off the drama. And in a way, both sides were living completely different lives. Gucci was locked up, facing a murder charge, his career on pause. Meanwhile, Jeezy was outside, riding the wave of success. Fast forward to January 17th, 2006, and Gucci Mane finally went to trial. His defense was simple. it was self-defense. He testified that the men had broken into his home, attacked him, and threatened to off him. A key witness, likely the female friend, backed up his story. The court ruled in Gucci's favor, and he was acquitted of all charges. Next up, we've got Snoop Dogg. These days, Snoop's seen as the laid-back, fun uncle of hip-hop. He's managed to win over a wider audience, but a lot of people forget just how wild his past really was. Before the fame, before Doggy Style dropped, Snoop was deep in the streets. He grew up in Long Beach and was a known member of the Rollin' 20 Crips gang from a young age. So even as he was on the verge of blowing up, recording his debut album and getting major attention in the hip-hop world, his ties to the streets never fully went away. That connection caught up with him in a serious way. Right in the middle of his rise, Snoop got caught up in a major case involving a deadly shooting. One man ended up dead, and Snoop found himself facing murder charges. On August 24, 1993, Snoop was involved in an altercation outside his apartment. Allegedly, Snoop had a run-in with Philip Woldemarian, another Crip from a different set. Woldemarian was upset about Snoop moving in on his turf. This guy was already known to Snoop, having threatened and insulted him before, and had just gotten out of jail for firing a gun in a schoolyard. The altercation supposedly started when someone in Snoop's crew flashed a gang sign at Woldemarian while driving by. Feeling disrespected, Woldemarian shouted back, "F y'all," asserting his claim over the territory. Things escalated quickly from there. Several people jumped into Snoop's Jeep, and according to the prosecution, they followed Woldemarian and his crew for a few blocks before losing them. However, Snoop's version of events was different, claiming they were just heading to the studio and not following Woldemarian. Not long after, they spotted Woldemarian and his friends at a nearby park having a picnic. They pulled up, and Woldemarian let them know they were on his turf. At this point, Snoop's bodyguard, McKinley Lee, stood up out of the top of the convertible Jeep.
Snoop had gotten into an altercation verbally with this kid, Philip Woldemarian, and so they had been arguing a few different times, and I think it was a little gang taunting going back and forth.
A heated exchange followed. Someone in Snoop's car reportedly shouted, "You ain't letting us know nothing, punk," to which Woldemarian responded, "Oh, I'm a punk," and slowly reached for his waistband, presumably for his .380. Snoop's bodyguard, Lee, saw the move and quickly fired off 5 shots, dropping Woldemarian. Snoop hit the gas and sped off, leaving Woldemarian dead at the scene.
He had a gun and, he was going for it. And my bodyguard reacted, like he was supposed to do.
Snoop's bodyguard shot and killed Philip Woldemarian.
The by-yourself hustler crew, trying to cover for their friend, took the gun from Woldemarian's body and hid it. Investigators eventually found the weapon a few months later. If that wasn't wild enough, Snoop Dogg decided to go on the run, evading the cops for an entire week. Allegedly, when the incident went down, Snoop told his management everything, but instead of turning him in, they kept it quiet.
I did receive a phone call about what happened. We didn't turn Snoop in right then and there. Snoop was in hiding for a little bit.
Apparently, Snoop wanted to surrender, but Suge Knight, the head honcho at Death Row Records, had other ideas. Suge saw the murder charge and Snoop being on the run as prime publicity for Snoop's upcoming album, Doggy Style. Apparently, Snoop wanted to surrender, but Suge Knight, the head honcho at Death Row Records, had other ideas. Suge saw the murder charge and Snoop being on the run as prime publicity for Snoop's upcoming album, Doggy Style.
I took him because I knew one thing. For me to make this dude the most hottest artist in the world, people gotta see him. But at the same time, it's his job to be an artist and promote this stuff. And then when they come to arrest him, it's my job to get him out of there.
Suge came up with a plan to ensure Snoop could still make an appearance at the 1993 VMAs before turning himself in. So, Snoop showed up at the VMAs cool as ever, doing chilled-out interviews with Dr. Dre, and even presenting the award for Best R&B. All this while knowing he had a murder charge hanging over his head and that he'd be arrested right after the event. Suge discreetly arranged for Snoop to be taken in by the LAPD once his appearances were done. Now, when we say discreet, considering it's the LAPD, it probably involved a few broken ribs and some crack found on him. But miraculously, Snoop was bailed out for a whopping $1 million bond, put up by none other than Suge Knight. But it took about 2 years for the case to actually go to trial. The defense argued that the LAPD had been sloppy in their investigation. They lost the shell casings from the murder weapon and the victim's bloody clothes, suggesting that the police had been destroying evidence. But the LAPD fired back, saying, "No, we weren't destroying evidence, we were just hiding it." The prosecutors pushed for a murder charge, claiming Snoop had directed his bodyguard McKinley Lee to shoot the victim in a drive-by while Snoop was driving the Jeep he owned. The prosecution brought in 24 witnesses to back up their case, but this backfired spectacularly. The sheer number of witnesses led to conflicting accounts and confusion for the jury. The defense kept it simple, calling just one witness and putting pressure on the prosecution, who essentially had to admit that their side had destroyed evidence. The entire prosecution ended up being held in contempt of court. Snoop recalled his lawyers delivering an emotional set of closing remarks that moved him and members of the jury to tears.
He did his closing argument, you know what I'm saying? Because it brought him to tears, it brought me to tears, and a couple of jurors to tears. Because he was actually telling them, I'm not representing Snoop Doggy Dogg for...
By February 1996, the not guilty verdict came in. Snoop and his bodyguard Lee were completely acquitted of murder. Lee got off on a self-defense basis, while Snoop faced manslaughter and accessory to murder charges that eventually ended in a mistrial and didn't go any further. Following the verdict, Snoop gave an emotional interview with MTV, where he clarified some of the facts of the case and took the opportunity to throw some shade at the prosecution.
He knew we was not guilty. He knew that. He knew McKinley Lee acted in self-defense. McKinley Lee has never, ever, ever, ever been involved with gangs. I have. McKinley Lee has never been involved with gangs. Oh, it's about Snoop Dogg being gang affiliated, but Snoop Dogg didn't pull the trigger. He drove the car away from his bodyguard acting in self-defense. But if you look at them, they don't care about that.
Next up, we've got Lil Boosie, one of the heavyweights in Southern hip-hop. Boosie's been putting in work for years, dropping 13 solo albums, a bunch of collabs, and over 40 mixtapes. He's definitely earned his spot as a staple in the rap game. But just like a lot of other artists who came up from the streets, trouble always seemed to follow him. Boosie's name has been tied to all kinds of drama over the years, but the biggest and most serious of them all was when he was accused of hiring a hitman to carry out a murder. On June 17, 2010, he found himself facing some incredibly severe charges. Boosie was indicted for the first-degree murder of Terry Boyd. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. He was also staring down charges for possession with intent to distribute narcotics, including codeine and marijuana, as well as conspiracy charges related to the narcotics and even bringing contraband into a penal institution. Boosie has always maintained his innocence regarding these accusations.
Rapper Lil Boosie hired a hitman to kill another man after hearing his life was in danger. Opening statements began yesterday in the first-degree murder trial of Lil Boosie, whose real name is Torrance Hatch.
The district attorney, Hiller Moore, suggested that the motive behind the killing of Boyd might have been related to a dispute over territorial control. The stakes were astronomically high for Boosie because, with the charges piled against him, he was potentially facing the death penalty. To add even more pressure, prosecutors were looking into Boosie's possible connections to at least 5 other murders. Diving deeper into the narrative, at the center of this complex web was a young man named Marlo Mike, who was just 15 years old at the time of the Boyd murder. Marlo Mike had a deeply entwined relationship with Boosie. When Mike was 14, he practically moved in with Boosie and, according to Street Talk, became Boosie's right-hand man. There were whispers and rumors suggesting that Mike had turned into something like a personal hitman for Boosie, while still just a teenager. Back in October 2009, a tragic event unfolded in East Baton Rouge. Terry Boyd was simply relaxing on his couch at home when suddenly 6 bullets tore through his window in the dead of night, ending his life. Witnesses reported seeing 2 individuals sprinting toward the train tracks immediately after the gunfire ceased. Here's where it all ties back to Boosie. He was accused of hiring Marlo Mike to carry out this hit, allegedly paying him $2,800 to murder Boyd.
Let's get you up to speed. Lil Boosie, whose real name is Torrance Hatch, is accused of hiring Michael Louding to kill Terry Boyd. Investigators say Louding is tied to 6 murders. Louding will likely testify against Boosie during his trial in April.
Fast forward, and throughout the trial, the prosecutors kept pushing the narrative that Boosie had paid Marlowe to eliminate Boyd, but Boosie remained steadfast in his defense. He insisted that there was nothing but love between him and Boyd, trying to dismantle the prosecution's claims with his testimony. During the trial, things took a complex turn when Marlowe Mike alleged that his confession to the crimes had been forced out of him. He claimed that law enforcement officials had used threats against him and his family to get him to confess, which seriously called into question the reliability of his statement. In a dramatic moment in court, prosecutors pushed Mike to show off a tattoo that read, "Yo Boosie, who's next?" which they displayed via enlarged photographs as part of their evidence pile, trying to tie him more closely to Boosie.
Apparently, Mike has a tattoo that says, "Yo Boosie, who next?"
Yeah.
And they used that in the courtroom?
Yeah.
Despite these bold moves by the prosecution, Police Sergeant Chris Johnson stood firm, denying any coercion took place during their interactions with Mike. In an unexpected twist, Mike, who had previously admitted to all the killings as part of a deal with the authorities, changed his tune during Boosie's trial. He retracted his previous statements that implicated Boosie, helping to exonerate 2 other individuals and significantly aiding in Boosie's eventual acquittal. In what seemed like a heartfelt moment, Mike even apologized to Boosie and offered testimony that supported his defense. Next up, we've got Cassidy, another rap icon who came up rough and used his talent as a way out. Linking up with Swizz Beatz was a game changer for him, and soon enough, he was dropping hits and making serious noise in the industry. But even with all that success, Cassidy still had one foot in the streets. Coming out of North Philly, it wasn't exactly safe to move around without having some kind of protection. That's where his inner circle came in. His boy Abdul, his brother Lick Moss, and their close friend Pretty Flock. They had his back, no doubt, but they also brought serious street energy with them. And when you keep that kind of company, it's only a matter of time before trouble comes knocking. And for Cassidy, it definitely did. That moment came on April 15th, 2005, which was supposed to be a huge day for Cassidy. He was dropping his highly anticipated single, "I'm a Hustler." He was in great spirits until he got a call from Abdul. Abdul told him that Pretty Flock had just gotten jumped by some guys they grew up with. Apparently, these dudes caught Flock running errands and decided to put hands on him for no real reason. After the fight, Flock called Abdul and told him to pull up immediately. Abdul wasted no time. He hopped in his car, called Cassidy to give him a heads up, and told him to be ready to bail him out of jail if things went left. Abdul picked up Flock, and they hit the streets looking for the guys who did it. It didn't take long. Abdul caught one of them outside a Rite Aid and handled him like he was in a UFC fight. But the guys who started all this quickly realized they had made a mistake. So one of them, a man named Desmond Hawkins, called Abdul that evening to try and squash the situation. He apologized for what happened and asked if they could make peace. Abdul told him to pull up to Cassidy's house at 9 p.m. so they could talk it out. But then, right before the meeting, Abdul went home, grabbed a gun, and stashed it in the bushes outside Cassidy's house. At 9:30 p.m., Desmond and his 2 friends arrived at Cassidy's house. Desmond honked his horn, and Abdul walked outside to talk. At first, it seemed like things might get settled, but the conversation turned into an argument. Then, without warning, Abdul walked over to the bushes, grabbed his gun, and allegedly made a life-changing decision. He shot Desmond. The scene was chaos. Abdul and Cassidy took off immediately, leaving Philly behind. But it was only a matter of time before the cops put the pieces together. On June 17, 2005, the Philadelphia police announced that both Cassidy and Abdul were wanted for the murder of Desmond Hawkins. The news shocked the hip-hop world. Cassidy was blowing up, and now he was looking at 25 to life. He turned himself in the same day, knowing there was no way out. Meanwhile, Abdul went on the run. He managed to stay low for about 2 weeks before he was caught in Ohio. When it came to their court cases, Cassidy and Abdul took two completely different approaches. The men who were in the car with Desmond told the cops that they saw Abdul shoot him, not Cassidy. The only reason Cassidy was even arrested was because it happened outside his house, making it look like he set it up. The prosecutors had a weak case against him, and he probably could have beaten it in trial. But trials take years, and Cassidy was desperate to get back to music. So instead of fighting it, he took a plea deal. He pled guilty to involuntary manslaughter and got an 11-month sentence.
I did get hit with a charge, aggravated assault and involuntary manslaughter.
Abdul, on the other hand, decided to fight the case in court, even though there were two eyewitnesses ready to testify. But Abdul had one thing on his side: fear. By the time his trial came around, the witnesses refused to take the stand. That's how much weight he carried in the streets. With no one willing to testify, he beat the case and walked free in 2007 with no charges. So now Cassidy had a felony on his record, and Abdul was completely in the clear. If anything, this situation was a lesson in choosing the right people to be around, because the wrong ones can derail your career or your life.
Innocent man, but I had to just sit on that by how I just was and decided to carry it out.
Next up is Travel Coleman, better known as G Depp, and his story is a little different from the rest. Unlike most cases where rappers try to beat the system or stay silent, G Depp actually almost got away with murder. But here's the twist: his conscience wouldn't let him rest. One night in the fall of 1993, just a month before his 19th birthday, Coleman was out riding his bike when he spotted a man standing under some scaffolding on Park Avenue and 114th Street. Looking for a quick come-up, he approached the man and said, "Give me the money."
Then I just went towards Park Avenue, and I saw a guy standing there. Approached him. He didn't seem like he saw me, so I just approached him. And then when I approached him, I asked him where the money was.
But instead of handing over the cash, the man hesitated. Then, according to Coleman, the guy suddenly reached for the gun. Instinct took over, and in a split second, Coleman pulled the trigger. He fired 3 times before fleeing on his bike.
And then he like grabbed the gun, and it was kind of like a struggle, and I pulled the gun.
At the time, he didn't know if the victim had survived, and no one suspected him. He tossed the gun in the East River and moved on. Years later, his music career took off when Diddy signed him to a $350,000 deal with Bad Boy Records. He had fame, money, and a family, but the guilt lingered. As his success faded and his life unraveled due to drug addiction and depression, the weight of his past became too much. In 2010, he confessed to a 16-year-old shooting, which police initially dismissed. But after following up, they linked his story to the unsolved murder of John Henkel in 1993, something G. Depp hadn't realized was fatal at the time. He was arrested, stood trial, and was found guilty of second-degree murder. Despite the outcome, G. Depp expressed no regret, saying turning himself in was the only way he could find peace. He was sentenced to 15 years to life in 2012, and though he's now a free man, his decision to come clean remains one of the most unexpected confessions in hip-hop history.